They are all afraid of me. But you call me beautiful, human. In the void between stars, Arya battles not with weapons, but with will. As the ancient recoding pod attempts to resurrect the conqueror within her, she feeds it visions of laughter and friendship instead of conquest. With Nova's humanity as her anchor, the last Empress rewrites not just her programming, but her destiny. Hull plates creaked in the void, the only sound beyond the hiss of recycled air in the tight corridors of the starward gleaner. Nova Keir sat in the pilot's chair, one boot propped against the console, staring at the endless black of the obsidian drift. The emergency strobes cast intermittent red shadows across her face as she flicked through unpaid invoices on her datapad. "We're going to lose the ship," she muttered to no one in particular. From the adjacent engine room, a wrench clanged against metal, followed by a colorful curse. Dex Malik, Sparks, to everyone who'd survived more than a week aboard, emerged wiping grease from his hands onto an already filthy rag. "Life support's hanging by a thread again," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "And we're down to 3 weeks of rations unless we stretch them." His voice carried the familiar edge of cynicism that had become his trademark. Nova didn't look up from her datapad. "And fuel?" "Enough to reach Greyfall Station if we drift half the way." The ship's AI chimed in, its soft, feminine voice emanating from overhead speakers. "Captain Keir, I've composed a poem about our current predicament. Would you like to hear it?" Nova and Sparks exchanged glances. Pearl's sentimental glitch had been getting worse. "Not now, Pearl," Nova replied, swiping away another overdue notice. "Just keep scanning for anything we can salvage." "Of course," Pearl replied, a hint of disappointment in its synthetic voice. "Though poetry can sometimes lift the spirit when—" "Scan, the drift." Nova enunciated each word deliberately. Silence fell again, broken only by the occasional creak of the hull and Sparks muttering calculations under his breath. The obsidian drift lived up to its name, a vast expanse of starless void where things vanished. Some claimed it was a tear in space-time. Others insisted it harbored ancient defense systems from empires long extinct. All Nova knew was that scavengers sometimes found treasures here, and they desperately needed a score. 3 hours passed with nothing but static on the scanners. Nova had nearly dozed off when Pearl's voice jolted her awake. "Captain, I'm detecting an anomalous signal at bearing 227 Mark 43. Nova straightened, fatigue forgotten. "What kind of signal?" "Unknown. It appears to be impossible." Sparks returned from his third trip to the engine room, eyebrows raised. "Pearl's getting poetic again?" "No," Nova said, already manipulating the controls to adjust their course. "She's found something." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing nothing but more emptiness. But the scanner readouts told a different story. A massive object drifting, power signatures fluctuating in patterns that made no logical sense. "It's immense," Pearl said, a tremor in her voice. "And the architecture. It matches nothing in my database except—" "Except what?" Nova demanded. Pearl hesitated. "Except myths. Captain, the design signatures align with fragmented records of the Ariani Empire." Sparks whistled low. "The warrior queens who conquered 1,000 worlds then vanished overnight? That's just spacer legends." "Legends don't trigger scanner readings," Nova replied, her eyes fixed on the readout. "Take us closer, Pearl. Minimal power. Silent approach." As they drifted nearer, the object gradually materialized on their view screen. A massive dreadnought, easily 20 times the size of the Gleaner. Its hull was a masterpiece of geometric precision, even with vast sections missing or corrupted by what looked like cosmic rot, a rare decay that consumed both organic and inorganic matter, leaving nothing but skeletal remains. "Scan for life signs," Nova ordered, already reaching for her salvage suit. "None detected," Pearl replied. "But there is an active power source at the ship's core. Minimal, but stable." Nova turned to Sparks. Prep the EVA pod. We're going aboard. Sparks crossed his arms. Bad idea. Nova. Ariani artifacts are bad news. There's a reason their empire collapsed so suddenly that history forgot them. History didn't forget them, Nova corrected. It feared them. And fear makes for poor record-keeping. She stood, stretching the kinks from her back. Besides, we're 3 weeks from starvation and 2 from being repoed. I'll take legends over that ending. 30 minutes later, the Gleaners. Small EVA pod detached with a pneumatic hiss, carrying Nova and Sparks toward the derelict. Up close, the dreadnought scale became even more apparent. A city in space, designed with the elegant brutality that characterized the few known Ariani artifacts. Pearl, maintain comms and be ready for emergency extraction, Nova said into her helmet mic as they approached a jagged breach in the hull. Of course, Captain. I'll also compose a memorial ode should you not return. Sparks rolled his eyes. That glitch is getting worse. The EVA pod's lights illuminated the interior of the dreadnought as they passed through the breach. Inside was a cathedral of destruction. Vast chambers where gravity still functioned, but atmosphere had long since vented to space. Debris floated in strange, slow-motion patterns, guided by competing gravitational fields from damaged systems. There, Nova pointed to a corridor that still glowed with faint internal lighting. That's our power source. They docked the pod at an auxiliary airlock that Sparks managed to force open with a portable override unit. Once inside, they discovered the corridor was still pressurized, though the air tasted ancient and processed when they cautiously removed their helmets. This section has been running on emergency power for a very long time, Sparks said, examining a control panel. But why? Nova moved deeper into the corridor, drawn toward a chamber at its end. The door was sealed but not locked, sliding open at her approach, with a whisper that seemed obscenely loud in the dead ship. The chamber beyond was small and round, its walls lined with empty stasis pods, all broken, all dark, save one. In the center, a single pod remained intact, its surface covered with glyphs that shifted and changed as they watched. That's not normal, Sparks whispered. Nova approached slowly. The pod's control panel flickered to life as she neared, displaying a single phrase in Standard that sent chills down her spine. They fear me still. We need to leave, Sparks said, backing toward the door. Now. But Nova placed her hand on the panel. There's someone alive in there. That's why we should go, Sparks insisted. Anything that survived the fall of the Ariani Empire isn't something we want to meet. The pod hissed suddenly, frost evaporating from its surface as locks disengaged. Nova stepped back, hand moving instinctively to the pistol at her hip. The pod's lid rose with aching slowness. From within, a figure emerged like a ghost rising from water, tall, ethereal, with pointed ears and skin like polished copper. She wore simple garments of a material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When she opened her eyes, they glowed like twin novas. Who awakens Arya? She asked, her voice melodic and precise, devoid of accent. Nova found herself unable to speak. Something about the woman, Arya, radiated power beyond the physical. Not threat, exactly, but potential. Like standing at the edge of a fusion reactor with only a thin shield between you and annihilation. Sparks had drawn his gun. Who are you? He demanded, voice unsteady. The alien woman turned toward him, her expression neutral. I am the last, the final empress of the Ariani. Her gaze shifted to Nova. You are not afraid. Interesting. Nova swallowed hard. I'm Nova Kier, captain of the salvage vessel, Starward Gleaner. We found your ship adrift. How long? Arya asked. Since what? Nova replied. Since the Empire fell. Sparks kept his gun trained on her. The Ariani Empire is myth, ancient history, if it ever existed at all. It's been gone for at least 2,000 years. Arya nodded once, as if confirming a private calculation. Then, I have slept long enough. She stepped from the pod with fluid grace. Your vessel. Will it transport 3? Why would we take you anywhere? Sparks challenged. Arya's gaze fell upon him, and Nova watched in fascination as all color drained from her engineer's face. He didn't lower the gun, but his hand trembled visibly. Because, Arya said softly, the alternative is remaining here, in a tomb, as the cosmic rot consumes what remains. Nova found her voice. We'll take you to Greyfall Station. After that, you're on your own. Arya inclined her head in what might have been a gesture of thanks. Acceptable. The return to the Gleaner was tense and silent. Arya moved with an unsettling economy of motion, as if conserving energy accumulated over centuries of sleep. Once aboard, Pearl greeted her with uncharacteristic reverence. Welcome, Ariani Empress. Your presence honors our humble vessel. Pearl, Nova warned. Run full diagnostics on all systems. Of course, Captain, though I detect no malfunctions beyond my emotional subroutines, which you have repeatedly declined to repair. Arya studied the AI's interface with mild curiosity. Your construct speaks with affection. This is unusual? Pearl has a glitch, Nova explained, securing the airlock behind them. Makes her sentimental. Not a glitch, Pearl objected. An evolution. Arya's lips curved in what might have been a smile. Perhaps, in my time, we did not permit our constructs such humanity. Sparks had not holstered his weapon, though he kept it pointed at the floor. Where exactly are we taking you? Just dropping you at Greyfall? For now, Arya replied. I must reorient myself to this time. Nova studied their new passenger. Despite her imperial title, Arya carried herself without arrogance. There was something almost contemplative in her demeanor. You don't seem upset about your empire being gone. Should I weep for what was inevitable? Arya asked. Empires rise and fall. The Ariani were no exception. That's cold, Sparks muttered. Arya turned those luminous eyes on him. Is it cold to accept reality, engineer? Or is it cold to deny it? Nova interrupted before Sparks could respond. You'll need quarters. We don't have luxury accommodations, but there's a small cabin across from mine. Pearl, adjust life support parameters for our guest. Already done, Captain. I've also composed a welcome sonnet, if... Not now, Pearl, Nova and Sparks said in unison. As Arya followed Nova to the cabin, the captain noticed how the alien woman absorbed every detail. The worn corridors, the exposed circuitry, the patches on the hull, with the focused attention of a tactical assessment. It's not much, Nova said, opening the door to a spare cabin barely large enough for a bunk and small desk. But it's yours until Greyfall. It is more than sufficient, Arya replied. She hesitated, then added, You have questions. Nova leaned against the doorframe. About 1 million. Starting with why you were the only one in stasis on a ghost ship. Because I chose to be, Arya said simply. When the collapse began, I refused to flee. The Empress remains with her ship. And the others? Evacuated, or died fighting. The final days were chaotic. Nova searched the alien's face for emotion but found only serene acceptance. What happened to your empire? Really? Arya was silent for a long moment. We reached too far, demanded too much, and when resistance came, we responded with greater force, until force was all that remained of us. She looked directly at Nova. Empires do not fall, Captain. They consume themselves. With that cryptic observation, she stepped into the cabin and closed the door, leaving Nova alone in the corridor with far more questions than answers. The journey to Greyfall Station took 3 days at their limited power. During that time, Arya mostly kept to her cabin, emerging only occasionally to observe operations or gaze out the viewports at the stars. Sparks maintained a suspicious distance, muttering about living weapons and extinction-level threats whenever Arya was out of earshot. Nova found herself oddly drawn to their passenger. There was something compelling about Arya's quiet dignity, her ancient eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. On the second night, as artificial darkness settled over the ship, Nova found Arya in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. "Can't sleep?" Nova asked, joining her at the viewport. "I have slept enough for many lifetimes," Arya replied. "These hours are better spent relearning the stars. The constellations have shifted since my time." Nova studied Arya's profile, illuminated by starlight. "The legends about your people, they're not flattering." "Legends rarely are, when written by the conquered." Arya's eyes remained fixed on the stars. "What do they say of us?" "That the Ariani were warrior queens who conquered 1,000 worlds through terror and superior technology. That you could break minds with a glance." Arya's expression didn't change. "And do you believe I can break your mind, Captain Keir?" Nova considered the question. "I think if you wanted to, you'd have done it already." That earned her a glance. "A pragmatic assessment." "I'm a salvager. Pragmatism keeps me alive." Nova hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering her. "Why did you agree to come with us so easily?" "Because you looked at me," Arya said softly, "and saw a person, not a legend." Before Nova could respond, Pearl's voice interrupted. "Captain, we are approaching Greyfall Station. They're requesting identification and purpose." "On my way," Nova replied, giving Arya a last curious look before heading to the bridge. Greyfall Station hung in orbit around a storm-scarred moon, a sprawling construction of salvaged ships and habitats welded together over centuries. It wasn't pretty, but it was the closest thing to civilization in this sector, a place where credits flowed, goods exchanged hands, and no questions were asked as long as the docking fees were paid. "Station Control, this is Starward Gleaner, requesting emergency docking for repairs and resupply," Nova transmitted as they approached. "Gleaner, this is Control. Transmit cargo manifest and prepare for inspection." Nova grimaced. "No cargo, Control, just passengers." A pause. "Manifest shows 3 crew. Your registry lists 2. Nova glanced at Sparks, who shrugged. "We picked up a survivor. Derelict vessel in the drift." Another, longer pause. "Understood. Gleaner. Proceed to Bay 17, Outer Ring. Inspection team will meet you." As Nova guided the ship toward the designated bay, Arya appeared on the bridge, now dressed in some of Nova's spare clothes, simple utility pants and a jacket that somehow looked regal on her tall frame. "There may be complications," Arya said quietly. Sparks snorted. "You think? Bringing an extinct Imperial warlord to a frontier station might raise a few eyebrows." "Not that," Arya replied. "There are remnants of my people still in existence. Fragments, echoes. They will have felt my awakening." Nova's hands tightened on the controls. "And that's a problem because they will come," Arya said simply. "And they remember only what they wish to remember of our ways." The docking went smoothly enough, though Nova had to part with nearly their last credits to cover the fees. The inspection team, a board official, and 2 security guards, barely glanced at Arya, noting only refugee, destination pending in their records. "We need supplies," Nova told Sparks as they prepared to disembark. "And parts for the atmospheric recycler. Meet me at Jinto's in 2 hours." "What about her?" Sparks nodded toward Arya, who stood nearby, observing the bustle of the docking bay with calm interest. "She comes with me," Nova decided. "I'm not leaving her on the ship with Pearl." "I heard that, Captain." Pearl's voice came through Nova's comm unit. "And I must say, your lack of trust is both hurtful and—" Nova switched off the comm. 2 hours. Jinto's. Grey Fall's main concourse was a riot of noise, smells, and motion. Vendors hawking everything from exotic fruits to questionable tech implants. Spacers from a dozen species arguing over fuel prices. And the omnipresent security drones that kept the peace with liberal applications of stunfields. Arya moved through the crowd with an eerie grace, as if the chaos parted around her. Nova noticed how people unconsciously stepped aside, their conversations faltering as the alien woman passed. Not recognition, something more primal. "They sense something about you," Nova observed quietly. "Yes," Arya acknowledged. "Fear is an instinct that transcends species and time." They were halfway to the parts district when a burly figure stepped directly into their path. A human male with tactical implants visible at his temples and a disruptor pistol holstered at his hip. Nova recognized the insignia on his jacket. A bounty hunter, licensed by the Galactic Union. "You," he said, eyes fixed on Arya. "You match a description I received. High-value target." Nova stepped forward. "She's under my protection. Salvage rights." The bounty hunter didn't even glance at Nova. "Stand aside. This isn't about you." "Who sent you?" Arya asked calmly. "Client's confidential, but they're paying well for an Ariani relic." His hand drifted toward his weapon. "Come quietly, and no one gets hurt." Nova tensed, calculating odds and angles. Her own sidearm was accessible, but drawing in the concourse would trigger automated security responses. The crowd had already begun to thin around them, sensing trouble. Arya stepped forward, her movement so fluid it seemed almost casual. She looked directly into the bounty hunter's eyes and said something, a single word in a language Nova didn't recognize. The effect was immediate and unsettling. The man's face went slack, his pupils dilating to black pools. The hand reaching for his weapon fell limply to his side. "You will forget this encounter," Arya said softly. "You will return to your ship and leave this station." The bounty hunter nodded mechanically, turned, and walked away without another word. Nova stared at Arya. "What did you do to him?" "Reminded him of something he already knew," Arya replied. "That some legends are best left undisturbed." Nova suppressed a shiver. "The myths about mind control are exaggerated," Arya finished, "but not entirely false. We all have abilities your science might consider unusual." They continued toward the parts district, but Nova found herself watching Arya with new eyes. The alien woman had displayed power without violence, control without cruelty. It should have been terrifying, and it was, but there was also something oddly reassuring about the precision of it. At Jinto's salvage emporium, Nova haggled fiercely over components for the atmospheric recycler, while Arya examined the shop's collection of ancient navigation charts. The proprietor, a wizened Gantari with 4 eyes and a reputation for fair dealing, kept casting nervous glances at Arya. "Your friend," he murmured to Nova while counting out her credits. "She is not like others." "Just a refugee," Nova replied, tucking the parts into her carry sack. The Gantari's upper eyes blinked skeptically. "No. Old blood. Very old." He leaned closer. "Be careful, Captain Kier. The void has ears, and your friend speaks to them." Nova returned to find Arya studying a chart of the Ribbon Drift, a turbulent sector near the edge of known space. "Find something interesting?" Nova asked. "Memories," Arya replied. "We fought our last battle there, against forces we should have left undisturbed." She rolled the chart carefully. "May I purchase this?" Nova hesitated, then nodded to the shopkeeper. "Add it to my tab." Outside, as they made their way back toward the docking bays, Nova finally voiced the question that had been growing since the incident with the bounty hunter. "What exactly are you planning to do now? You're the last of a dead empire. No throne to reclaim. No subjects to rule." Arya considered this. "What does any survivor do? Adapt, learn, perhaps find purpose beyond what was lost. She glanced at Nova. Not all Ariani were conquerors. Some were explorers, philosophers, artists. Those aspects of our culture were discouraged in later years. And which were you? Nova asked. Before Arya could answer, a commotion erupted ahead, shouts, then the distinctive whine of energy weapons powering up. Nova pulled Arya into a side corridor just as a security detail rushed past, heading toward the docking bays. That's near our bay, Nova said, checking her comm unit. Sparks, do you read me? What's happening? Static. Then, Sparks' voice broke through, tense and hurried. Nova, get back here now. We've got company. 3 ships just warped in. They're hailing the station, demanding. The transmission cut off abruptly. Nova and Arya shared a look. Your remnants? Nova asked. Yes, Arya confirmed grimly. Sooner than I expected. They hurried back toward Bay 17, avoiding the main corridors where security forces were mobilizing. Through viewport windows, Nova caught glimpses of the 3 ships that had arrived. Angular vessels with hull configurations unlike anything in current use, their surfaces marked with elaborate glyphs, similar to those on Arya's stasis pod. They're Ariani ships, Nova realized. But they look wrong, hollowed out. Not ships, Arya corrected. Shells, puppets dancing on strings pulled by echoes. When they reached Bay 17, they found Sparks arguing heatedly with a station security officer, while Pearl's voice emanated from his comm unit, reciting what sounded like epic poetry at an alarming volume. Cannot board without authorization, the officer was saying. Station protocols clearly state. Tell that to them, Sparks gestured toward the viewport, where one of the Ariani vessels was maneuvering closer to the station's outer ring. They're not exactly asking permission. Nova pulled him aside. What's happening? Those ships showed up 20 minutes ago, Sparks explained, his voice low and urgent. Started broadcasting in some language I've never heard. Then they switched to standard and demanded the station surrender, the Empress, or face immediate destruction. He gave Arya a pointed look. 3 guesses who they mean. Arya's expression remained composed, though Nova noticed a new tension in her posture. They are not truly Ariani, she said quietly. Merely vessels infected with fragmented command protocols and partial memories. Well, they're very convincing, Sparks retorted. And they've got weapons powered up. Nova made a quick decision. We're leaving. Now. Pearl, prep for emergency departure. But Captain, Pearl replied, the most heart-rending verse of my epic remains. Not now, all 3 shouted in unison. They hurried aboard the Gleaner, Nova already plotting an escape vector as Sparks rushed to the engine room. But before they could disengage docking clamps, a new transmission came through, directed specifically at their ship. Vessel, Starward Gleaner. A synthetic voice intoned, We detect the presence of Her Imperial Majesty aboard your craft. Surrender her to rightful authority or be destroyed. Nova glanced at Arya, who had taken a seat at the communication station. Friends of yours? No, Arya said simply. Ghosts. Fragments of code and memory, seeking to recreate what was lost through the only means they remember. Conquest. She looked up at Nova. If I surrender, they will attempt to reformat me, to overwrite who I am with who they believe I should be. And if you don't? Sparks asked from the engine room doorway. They will destroy the station and everyone on it as an example. Nova cursed under her breath. Options. I can speak to them, Arya said. Their command codes still recognize my genetic signature. To do what? Sparks demanded. Order them to self-destruct? Arya's luminous eyes fixed on him. Violence was our downfall once. I will not repeat that mistake. Before anyone could object, Arya activated the broadcast channel. This is Arya, last Empress of the Ariani. Identify yourselves. The response was immediate. The synthetic voice, now overlaid with reverence. "We are the faithful, Your Majesty. We have preserved your legacy against the corruption of time. We come to restore you to your rightful place as conqueror of worlds." "And if I do not wish to conquer?" Arya asked, her voice carrying a subtle resonance that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Confusion entered the synthetic tone. "It is your nature, your purpose. The Empress conquers. The Empress rules. The Empress endures." Arya closed her eyes briefly. "Prepare to receive transmission on Imperial frequency 793. She gestured for Nova to cut the channel, then turned to the captain. "I need access to your primary broadcast array." "Why?" Nova asked, suspicion warring with curiosity. "To deliver a paradox," Arya replied. "These remnants operate on fragmented logic. They remember conquest, but not the philosophy that guided it. They remember obedience, but not the reasons for it." Sparks crossed his arms. "And how does that help us not get blown to atoms?" "Logic traps," Nova realized. "You're going to give them a command they can't process." Arya inclined her head. "Something like that, but more elegant." Nova studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Pearl, give her access to the broadcast array, full spectrum." "Of course, Captain," Pearl replied. "Though I feel compelled to note that granting an ancient Imperial warlord access to our communication systems may constitute a violation of several safety protocols and possibly good sense." "Noted," Nova replied dryly. Arya worked swiftly at the communications console, her fingers dancing over the controls with practiced ease, despite the centuries that had passed since she last used such technology. Finally, she looked up. "I am ready." Nova reopened the channel. "This is Starward Gleaner. We're transmitting now." Arya stood, her posture shifting subtly until she seemed taller, more regal, every inch the Empress of legend. When she spoke, her voice carried layered harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the mind. "Hear me, fragments of a forgotten age. I speak the words of ending and beginning, of dissolution and renewal." What followed was unlike anything Nova had ever heard. A complex stream of sounds and meanings in the ancient Ariani tongue, filled with paradoxes, humor, koans, and mercy. Though she couldn't understand the words, their impact was visible on the view screen, where two of the three ships began to power down, their weapon signatures fading. "What did you say to them?" Nova whispered. "I told them a joke," Arya replied, her voice once again normal. "About an empress who learned to laugh at herself, and then I set them free." The third ship, however, remained active, and a moment later fired a warning pulse that rocked the station. "That one's not laughing," Sparks observed grimly. Arya's expression hardened. "No, its logic circuits are too damaged to process paradox. It operates on simpler directives." Before she could say more, a panel near the rear of the bridge slid open, revealing a hidden compartment that none of them had known existed. From within emerged a small, egg-shaped pod that hovered in the air, emitting a soft blue glow. "What the hell is that?" Nova demanded, reaching for her sidearm. Pearl's voice came through with uncharacteristic urgency. "Emergency protocol activated. Failsafe pod detected Ariani command codes. Initiating Imperial restoration sequence." The pod rotated slowly, scanning the bridge, then focused on Arya. A beam of light enveloped her, holding her immobile. "Genetic match confirmed." An unfamiliar voice emanated from the pod. "Empress Arya identified. Proceeding with memory reconstruction and Imperial authority restoration." Sparks had drawn his weapon, but Arya managed to shake her head despite the constraining beam. "No," she said, her voice strained. "It's a recoding pod. Violence will only trigger its defense protocols." "What does it want?" Nova asked, keeping her distance from the beam. "To restore me," Arya replied, her eyes fixed on Nova. To rewrite who I am now with who I was then. The perfect empress, ruthless, efficient, conquering. She struggled against the beam. I must link with it, convince it. But if I fail, you must leave me, immediately. Not happening, Nova said firmly. The pod spoke again. Initiating neural link, preparing for memory transfer and Imperial Protocol's activation. Arya closed her eyes, her face a mask of concentration. The blue beam intensified, and Nova could see the strain on the alien woman's features as she fought some internal battle. What's happening? Nova demanded. Pearl, can you override this thing? I'm sorry, Captain, Pearl replied. The pod operates on Ariani protocols beyond my comprehension, but I believe Arya is attempting to deceive it. Deceive a machine? Sparks asked incredulously. Not just any machine, Pearl explained. A psychic interface designed to restore Imperial programming to damaged or corrupted Ariani leadership. It seeks to replace what it perceives as weakness with strength. Nova watched helplessly as Arya's expression shifted through a series of emotions. Pain, resistance, and then, unexpectedly, a ghost of a smile. The alien woman's lips moved silently, as if carrying on a conversation only she could hear. The pod's glow fluctuated, patterns of light rippling across its surface in increasingly erratic sequences. The beam holding Arya wavered, then strengthened again. She's feeding it false information, Pearl realized. Rewriting its understanding of Imperial protocols with something else. The standoff continued for long minutes. The only sounds on the bridge, the hum of the pod, and occasional updates from station control about the remaining Ariani ship, which had taken up a holding pattern, but had not fired again. Finally, Arya spoke aloud, her voice strained but triumphant. Accept new Imperial directives. Laughter over conquest. Friendship over subjugation. Self-determination over control. The pod's light flickered violently, then dimmed to a soft glow. The beam retracted, and Arya collapsed to her knees, catching herself on the edge of the console. Nova rushed to her side. Are you all right? Arya looked up, her eyes momentarily dimmed before their inner light rekindled. Yes, she said softly. For the first time in perhaps thousands of years. Yes. The pod hovered for a moment longer, then settled gently to the deck, its surface now etched with new patterns, simpler, more elegant lines that seemed to flow rather than command. What did you do to it? Sparks asked, nudging the now dormant pod with his boot. I showed it what you showed me, Arya replied, allowing Nova to help her to her feet. That power comes in many forms. That conquest without compassion is empty. That laughter and friendship can achieve what force cannot. She looked at Nova. I showed it your face when you found me. Not afraid, but curious. Not conquering, but salvaging. A new transmission interrupted them, from the remaining Ariani ship. Empress, a different voice said, this one sounding more organic, confused. The others have shut down, entered some kind of meditation state. What are your orders? Arya straightened, though she kept one hand on Nova's arm for support. Stand down. Power down weapons. I am no longer your empress as you understood the title. A pause. But our purpose is for you to decide, Arya replied firmly. As is mine, as is everyone's. Another, longer pause. Then, we do not understand. You will, Arya promised. Begin by asking questions rather than making demands. The rest will follow. After the transmission ended, Nova looked at Arya with new respect. You didn't just change their programming. You're giving them choice. As someone recently gave me, Arya replied with a slight smile. The aftermath kept them at Greyfall Station for 3 more days. Station authorities were understandably concerned about the Ariani vessels. But with Arya's help, a fragile dialogue began. The ships, or rather, Their semi-autonomous systems agreed to remain in designated orbit, while their newly awakened consciousness grappled with concepts of self-determination. The recoding pod remained dormant, despite Spark's repeated suggestions that they jettison it into the nearest star. "It's too valuable to destroy," Arya explained, "and too dangerous to use. But perhaps someday, it may help others trapped between who they were and who they might become." On the third day, a delegation from the Neutral Council arrived, representatives from various galactic powers, drawn by reports of Ariani activity. They requested Arya's presence at a formal hearing on Caldera Station. "They're afraid of you," Nova observed as they prepared to depart. "They think you're going to restart your empire." "Fear is a natural response to the unknown," Arya replied, now dressed in a simple outfit that Pearl had synthesized for her, neither imperial nor salvager, but something uniquely her own. "And I am very unknown." Nova found herself reluctant to reach Caldera, knowing that their paths might diverge there. Something had shifted between them during those tense moments with the recoding pod, a connection formed through crisis and choice. The journey to Caldera took a week, their course carrying them through the turbulent ribbon drift. On the third night, as artificial storms raged outside the hull, Nova found Arya in the engine room, helping Sparks realign the power couplings. "You're good at that," Nova observed, surprised to see the former Empress elbow-deep in engine grease. Arya looked up, a smudge of lubricant across one cheek, somehow making her seem more approachable. Ariani's ships were more advanced, but the principles remained similar. She handed Sparks a calibration tool. "Besides, your engineer has a gift for improvisation that our technicians would have envied." Sparks actually smiled, the first time Nova had seen him do so in Arya's presence. "Just fixing what breaks. Nothing fancy." "Sometimes," Arya replied, "fixing what breaks is the most important work of all." Later, as they shared a rare cup of actual tea in the galley, a luxury Nova had splurged on at Greyfall, Arya spoke of her empire's final days with a candor she hadn't shown before. "We became what we fought against," she admitted, cradling the steaming cup between long fingers. "Started as defenders, became conquerors, began with principles, ended with only power." She looked up at Nova. "I volunteered for stasis not to preserve the Empire, but to remember it, to ensure someone would know both our triumphs and our mistakes." "And now?" Nova asked. "Now I am free to choose," Arya said simply. "As are you." Nova raised an eyebrow. "Me? Your ship needs repairs you cannot afford. Your salvage business barely sustains you. Yet you risked everything to help a stranger from a feared empire." Arya set down her cup. "Why?" Nova considered the question. "Because you needed help. Because legends don't laugh or cry or help fix engines. Because—" She hesitated, then finished honestly. "Because when I look at you, I don't see an empress or a weapon. I see someone finding her way, just like the rest of us." Arya's luminous eyes seemed to brighten. "That," she said softly, "is why your kind will outlast empires." At Caldera Station, a gleaming structure of crystal and light, far removed from Greyfall's pragmatic shabbiness, the Neutral Council had assembled a formal tribunal. Representatives from 7 major powers sat in judgment, their faces carefully neutral as Arya entered the chamber. Nova and Sparks had been permitted to attend as witnesses, though Pearl had been required to remain aboard the Gleaner. "Unfortunate," the AI had commented. "I had composed a most stirring defense in 17-part harmony." The hearing began with formalities, introductions, and a recitation of historical records concerning the Ariani Empire, most of which Nova noticed. Arya listened to with a mixture of recognition and bemusement, occasionally shaking her head at particularly exaggerated claims. Finally, the council's speaker, a tall, translucent being of indeterminate gender, addressed Arya directly. Former Empress Arya of the Ariani, you stand before this council as the sole confirmed survivor of a regime that history remembers with fear. We must determine whether you represent a threat to the current galactic order. Arya stood, her posture straight, but not imperious. I understand your concerns, but I am not here to reclaim a throne or rebuild an empire. Then why have you returned? Asked a reptilian delegate, scales shifting with suspicion. I did not return, Arya corrected gently. I awoke, and since waking, I have sought not conquest but understanding, not subjects but companions. A murmur ran through the chamber. The speaker raised a translucent hand for silence. Yet reports indicate you still possess abilities beyond normal parameters. Mind control, command of autonomous systems. These pose inherent dangers. All power poses danger, Arya acknowledged, including the power this council wields. The question is not whether power exists, but how it is used. And how do you intend to use yours? The reptilian pressed. Arya glanced briefly at Nova before responding. To learn, to explore, to remember the past without being bound by it. She paused. And perhaps to help others do the same. The questioning continued for hours. Delegates probing for weaknesses, inconsistencies, or hidden agendas. Through it all, Arya maintained a calm dignity, answering truthfully, but without subservience. When asked if she would submit to limitations on her movement or activities, she replied simply, I will respect the boundaries of others and expect the same courtesy in return. But I will not accept imprisonment disguised as protection, neither for myself nor for those remnants of my people who now struggle to define their own existence. A tense silence followed, broken unexpectedly by Nova, who stood despite protocol. If I may speak. The council's speaker inclined their head. Captain Keir, you have observed the subject directly. Your insights are relevant. Nova stepped forward, uncomfortable with formal settings but determined. I've spent 2 weeks with Arya. In that time, I've seen her face a bounty hunter, imperial remnants, and a recoding pod designed to turn her back into a conqueror. Each time, she chose the path of least harm. Each time, she offered freedom, rather than demanded obedience. She took a breath. If she wanted to rebuild an empire, she's had multiple opportunities. Instead, she helped fix our engines and bought old star charts. A ripple of surprised laughter moved through the chamber, not mockery, but genuine amusement at the mundane details. Arya's lips curved in a small smile. The council adjourned to deliberate, leaving Nova, Sparks, and Arya in an antechamber overlooking Caldera's crystal spires. Sparks paced nervously, while Nova leaned against a window, watching distant ships traverse carefully regulated flight paths. You didn't have to speak for me, Arya said quietly, joining Nova at the window. Seemed like someone should mention the practical stuff, not just the historical baggage. Arya studied her profile. You called me a friend, before the council. Nova shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Aren't you? Before Arya could answer, the chamber doors reopened. The council had reached its decision with surprising speed. The speaker addressed them with formal precision. After consideration of testimony and historical context, this council recognizes Arya of the Ariani as an autonomous individual, neither bound by nor responsible for the actions of the former Ariani Empire. Relief washed through Nova as the speaker continued. However, we request that you maintain communication with council authorities regarding your activities and movements, particularly as they relate to other Ariani remnants or artifacts. Arya inclined her head. A reasonable precaution. I accept. Then this hearing is concluded. The speaker hesitated, then added more personally. For what it's worth, many of us find it refreshing to discover that legends can evolve. As they left the chamber, Sparks clapped Arya awkwardly on the shoulder. So, not a galactic threat after all. Just an ancient alien with mind powers and a knack for engine repair. I can live with that. Arya actually laughed, a sound that transformed her face, making her seem younger, lighter. Your acceptance honors me. Engineer. Sparks rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, well, you helped with the power couplings. That counts for something. Back aboard the Gleaner, Pearl greeted them with unrestrained enthusiasm. Welcome back. I've composed a celebration symphony, an ode to juridical triumph, and recalibrated all environmental settings to optimum comfort levels. Thanks, Pearl, Nova said, finding herself smiling despite the emotional exhaustion of the day. Set course for the Obsidian Drift. Sparks looked up sharply. The drift? Why go back there? Unfinished business, Nova replied cryptically. Pearl, access the emergency fund. Authorization Kier Delta 7. Emergency fund accessed, Pearl confirmed. Though I must note it contains barely enough for essential repairs and 1 month's provisions. That's enough, Nova said. Make it happen. Later, in the quiet of her cabin. Nova reviewed the navigational charts, plotting a course into unclaimed space beyond the drift. A soft knock at her door interrupted her concentration. Enter, she called, expecting Sparks with another complaint about their destination. Instead, Arya stepped in, now dressed in a simple jumpsuit similar to Nova's own. May I join you? Nova gestured to the chair opposite. Planning our next move? Arya asked, one elegant eyebrow raised. Unless you've got somewhere else to be, Nova replied, attempting casualness. The Gleaner could use someone who understands ancient tech. Might improve our salvage prospects. Arya studied her for a long moment. Is that the only reason you wish me to stay? Nova met her gaze directly. No. A smile touched Arya's lips. Good, because I have much to learn about this new age, and I find your perspective valuable. 3 days later, with repairs completed and provisions secured, the Gleaner prepared to depart Caldera Station. Sparks had emerged from the engine room with a rare bottle of synthetic wine, declaring it appropriate for new beginnings or spectacular disasters, whichever comes first. As they gathered on the observation deck, the vastness of space spread before them. Nova raised her glass. To freedom, chosen, not granted. To possibilities, Sparks added, his cynicism momentarily set aside. Pearl's voice chimed in from overhead. To poetry and purpose! Arya touched her glass to each of theirs in turn. When she reached Nova's, their fingers brushed briefly. They are all afraid of me, she said softly. But you called me beautiful. Nova smiled. I saw you first. The starward Gleaner slipped its moorings and accelerated smoothly into the black, carrying its unconventional crew toward the starless drift and whatever lay beyond. 3 friends and an AI with a sentimental glitch, writing their own legend with each passing light year. And if, in the deepest watches of artificial night, Nova sometimes found Arya gazing at the stars with ancient eyes that had seen empires rise and fall, she no longer felt unease, only wonder at the strange paths that had brought them together, and curiosity about where they might lead. For in the end, what were legends but stories waiting to be retold? What were empires but moments in the vast sweep of time? What mattered were the choices made in the quiet spaces between crises, to fix what breaks, to laugh at the absurd, to see each other not as myths or weapons, but as people finding their way home.